between two DMs, here with my man 5e Trash, aka Jon Aldric. Jon, how you doing today, brother?
Good, I'm doing great.
Glad to hear that. Glad to have you here, my man. It's yeah, I mean, this is essentially an opportunity for, I mean, us as DMs to chop it up, for me to kind of sit at the foot of the table, pick up some knowledge scraps, apply them to my game. But man, I'm just so happy you could roll through. You can find Jon at 5e Trash pretty much across the board. I know him through Twitter, where you post some hilarious stuff, man. Like, you're killing me.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. It's all it's all tweets that I draft, send, delete, and then redraft 9 times before it actually gets out there. So.
There you go. So highly concentrated juice is what that is.
Yes.
And man, yeah, you're on DM's Guild. Like, we'll properly plug that at the end of the actual sesh. But just have really enjoyed that too, man. Like, I mean, I feel like it's really hard to create content like that. And I mean, sometimes I feel like even in my own homebrew or my own games that I'm sort of like, man, like, it's all been done. But every time you present something, it really feels at minimum like it's your flavor, man. Like, is that intentional? Is it just like kind of one of those things that just happens? Are you redrafting it like your tweets?
Oh man. So like the content, like the modules that I put together, really started off trying to deliver on like the idea of trash. Like if you scroll down to like the bottom of my website on 5etrash.com, like the first thing that I wrote was a subclass for a warlock whose patron was a zaddy. It was very much about like being the submissive. And then there's like a cleric for like alt writers. So like really just leaning into the sort of drinking the Kool-Aid of a certain political faction. And really kind of goofy stuff. And it actually started because I tried to release a couple of things on the DM's Guild and I got turned down. And they said,
"Oh, no way. Are you kidding me?"
They were like, it doesn't meet our content restrictions. They have hard rules about certain themes, which is like totally understandable, and I'm not knocking anything. There's a whole thing about like you can't have like male nipples on the DM's Guild, which I think is hilarious. That was not something I got banned for.
That's great. You're like, somehow I skirted around it.
But yeah. But no, so it really came to like, I don't know, just trying to create like goofy kind of pop culture inspired stuff. And then I feel like this is the cycle that everyone has, whether it's creating D&D content or starting D&D, is you start off, you play it, you kind of goof around, and then you kind of lean into like, oh, actually I kind of want to take this seriously. I kind of want to dig in deeper and kind of like do a little bit more. And like my first, I recall my first character being something that like a friend of mine rolled up for me, and his name is the elf formerly known as Dobby. And it was just like it was like a goofball like 2-shot that a friend of mine started because like he wanted to start playing 5e, and that was my first game. And then like after a couple of rounds of that, I was like, actually, can we like make a serious campaign? Like, now that I see what this game is, like I kind of want to like really sink my teeth in, you know.
100%.
That was a really long-winded answer.
No.
Your question.
It gave me 15 more things. I mean, like, that's so. I mean, that was my experience as well. Honestly, I mean, I didn't have a dope name, artist formerly known as Dobby, but like that jump from kind of like lighthearted, enjoying it, to seeing how the game is played and thus how it could potentially go in terms of storytelling, in terms of stakes or meaning. Yeah, I fell down that rabbit hole so hard. And I mean, we were talking about a little bit like off stream. I mean, just, your relationship with people in the business, and I feel like you have a great understanding of that. But that's how my whole life has been in many ways, where I'm like, I kind of enjoy making goofs and like doing this, that, the other.
Yeah.
And then as I've turned that into a profession, with D&D like sinking its teeth into me, and then the fever taking hold of my brain, soul, and heart, I've seen that too, where I'm like, man, not even that because that's its own thing that we should talk about in terms of, turning that into a profitable module of any kind. Even just wanting to create content that you, Jon Aldric, view as high-level D&D additions to the Pantheon is a difference than meeting every other Saturday and having some fun tossing some dice, So I totally feel that and get that. I'm curious, man, like, were you, two-part question, was D&D your first TTRPG?
Yes. I mean, definitely, I think it started off, so in my early 20s, I used to play rugby actually, and
Oh, sick.
I was getting drinks with a couple of my rugby buddies, and it was the summer that, what do you call it? Stranger Things came out,
Oh man.
and we were getting drinks, and we were like, oh, I want to play D&D. That's what D&D is like. I went in on that. And then one of them was like, one of my friends was like, oh yeah, I used to play in college. Let me like go. It was like right when 5e came out. He's like, let me go buy the new books, read up on it, and I'll just start running a game. And it just kind of went from there. And that's actually been my core group for 7 years now. So
Wow.
yeah, it was.
And is that running
I fell in
like
fast
same
and hard.
campaign?
No, so I think we're on our 4th campaign now, which I've been running for 3 years.
Amazing.
The pandemic kind of got in the way of some of that. So 3 years is 2.5 of those were kind of Zoom calls or like meeting every other month or yeah.
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 And is it, how many are you running that right now? Are you running multiple campaigns right now?
No, so we're just doing mine. One of the other players was running his own campaign for a little while. He was kind of getting burnt out. So we were doing like an every other session is a different campaign and a different DM, which is kind of a nice cadence, especially for like, especially if, I think if everyone has sort of an even interest in both running and playing. It was kind of nice where it gave each DM a little bit of a break between sessions to like make the plans for the next one, stay ahead of the game, and then also get to experience the other side of the table. So I definitely recommend that for any table where there are multiple people interested. Like you do not need to do one campaign at a time. Like find an alternate and then just kind of bounce back and forth. And
that's a wild way to do it. I do see a ton of pros with that. And I mean, this was 2 separate campaigns, 2 separate DMs, but a same combination of whatever, 5 or 6 people.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. Man, that's rowdy. And I guess, because I mean, I was going to ask, my second part of the 2-part question was more or less like, were you a DM or a player first? Sounds like you were a player first. But was this the Stranger Things moment, was that the impetus into you becoming a DM?
So the reason I actually became a DM was it was our second campaign. One of our players, Mikey, was running Strahd, and it was his first time running the game, and he just like leaned into all of it. He was like, whatever Unearthed Arcana, whatever homebrew you want to use, like I'm into it. And I started just like searching and collecting and like finding all this stuff that was out there, and I found it all really inspiring. Like the community made stuff, the stuff that like the DM's Guild had, the stuff that was Wizards of the Coast official, etc. And it was actually when I wrote the backstory for my character in that game, which is still, I think, he's sort of like the villain of like our group.
Can you share just like a little bit of that? Like who is this guy?
Yeah, sure. So his name was Bloodquell the Betrayer. He was.
I love it when like the name
evil.
Contains something enormous like that. It's like the Betrayer.
Yeah, there was like
Come
no,
again?
No. So like Mikey was running the game, and he was kind of like, your character should be someone who is kind of like an outcast or damned in some way. And so like I wrote this like incredibly elaborate backstory of like how he was the vizier of a far off kingdom. He was like this like vulture like Aarakocra. He was a warlock, Obvi, and
Obvi, let's go.
He eventually like betrayed his kingdom and like tried to like ascend to power, and that was like the deal that he had with his patron, and it did not go well. He was banished. He kind of set an entire city on fire, then left, and then kind of was like knocked back down to level 1. And then that's when he like became damned to like go to Barovia, and like that was his whole character. But like he was just like full of fuckery. He eventually, I think his shenanigans as a character and like his motivations stopped aligning with the table. And so we, as a collective, how should we kill him? Because he can't be sustained in this game anymore. And like I recognize that as the person who wrote this character. Like he's got
to go. The betrayer's got to go.
Exactly. And so like Mikey like played this whole thing where like he told Strahd of our location, and Strahd came in, and then there's this like dual battle where like Strahd was fighting the players, and the players were fighting me and Strahd, and eventually like I died, and there was a very good reason why Strahd left, but yeah. So this is a very long-winded way of coming around to how I became the DM. The reason I became a DM was when I wrote that elaborate backstory, I kept having to delete things out of it to make it concise. And then I was like, actually, this isn't a character backstory. This is a campaign.
Yeah.
And so that's what I really started writing around. And that's how I started to get into building out my, like, much larger world. So, yeah.
Yeah, dude, that is so good. I mean, it is funny whenever you start writing anything, and then it untaps this whole spinning
it just, like,
yarn.
Unravels.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, I get that as a player where you're like, well, it's collaborative. Like, I do want to rap with a bunch of people, but in the same breath, I don't want to edit any of these wild, threads that I'm tugging at. And first off, and certainly not last off, what up, guys? Appreciate y'all rolling through. Matt Bro, I love you. To the max, Fuzka. That cheese talk about sesh that you had, I'm not sure when that was, 2-3 days ago, absolutely loved it. But it was more one of those things that for me, I was like, let's go. Like, I felt like I learned the crew. Like, I really feel like I learned your crew in a good way. Like, vibe with them where I'm like, this is tight. Gervonch, you're my man, dude. Appreciate you rolling through. You're too kind to me. I'm certainly not a messiah. But some myths have been busted by me, so I'll own that. I've busted some myths. I'm hanging out here with Jon Aldric, aka @5e Trash, aka the Trash Man. And Jon was just basically sharing his jump from player to DM. He does play in a long stretching campaign, and man, that is so wild. So, is that also how you found? Like, well, before I asked that question, do you do a lot of homebrew? Like, I'm presuming yes in your campaigns, but I don't want to presume that.
I do a lot of my own homebrew. I do borrow a lot of homebrew that's out there. I think I've seen people in the community who are like purists of like, if you don't write every aspect of your campaign,
you lazy
trash.
bitch.
And it's like, well, guess what? I'm trash. Because... because there's so much out there already that is free, and like people are enthusiastic for you to use. My stuff is like among that of like, if there's anything that I've ever written that like I find out someone used in their campaign, like I'm delighted.
Yeah,
but like
heck yeah.
The wealth of resources out there, both free and paid, are amazing. That like you should be tapping into that. You should not feel like you have to be the sole writer and kind of like creator of everything. Like, I've pulled dungeons that other people have written and like folded them into my campaign. I pull all sorts of magic items. I've pulled magic items that have no business being in the hands of a level 3 party. There's a learning curve.
That's a campaign unto itself,
like,
right?
Yes. Yeah. There's a learning curve of what is an appropriate item to hand to someone, or what is something that is like so bombastically overpowered or overwrought with like rules and such that like you should not adopt it.
Sure.
But it comes with the game. Yeah.
No, that's sick. Matt Pro, you're my boy. Let us know if we can put down an order of muffins, because I'm there. Maybe we'll get them for everybody. Gervonch, Fuzka, dessert. But I do also love homebrew. I mean, that is like, I feel like any DM that isn't at least like sampling a little bit is, unless they really just don't like it, which is totally fine, in which case like run the module. Like, I totally get that, where they're like, no, I want it to be preset, so then I can just be an administrator, which is fun unto itself. But I too fall into homebrew a lot, and in what you're talking about in terms of like that balance issue, I think that can be something that's really, really scary, right? I mean, I see that on Reddit a lot. I feel like I have received some questions to that end, which is some version of, hey, I'm running Lost Mines. I'm thinking about giving my party, a Cloak of the Stars. Should I? And it's so hard to answer that, because it really depends on any number of things. But whenever you're homebrewing it, it's even more complicated, because you are creating something. There's no reference point. It hasn't been play tested by wizards or anyone, unless you're doing it. And that is the only thing it's the only kind of caveat I attach to any discussion on homebrew. Obviously stuff like lore and cool campaign plots and the fact that your BBEG has like a little pet, imp that's pink, that's dope. Like, that's free.
Yeah.
But in terms of, creating a magic item or a whole class or device or weapon, I sometimes feel like that's where I spend the most time, like, not doubting myself, but like triple checking. I'm like, okay, fuck, how is Tremor Sense going to fuck me in a couple months if I give it to my paladin? You know what I mean?
This is like, I think that the funniest thing that I think players and DMs oversweat about is like the canon of the game. And like it becomes this conversation of like, well, once it's in the game, it's stuck in there, and like you can't undo it. And it's like all of this is low stakes make 'em ups that we all are sharing with our brains that we can retcon at any point. Yeah. I think one of the first magic items, before I really started writing content, one of the first magic items I came up with for a group of friends was the Cloak of Forgettability, which was supposed to be like a low level Cloak of Invisibility. And it was just supposed to be like kind of a goofy joke item. And a player figured out that it was basically a way for him to, like, as a rogue, never be remembered and like commit any crime that he wanted to. And it became this case of like, all right, so it was an out of game conversation between me, the DM, and this player being like, this was my intention for this item, was like a goofy, dumb thing, and this is what you've done with it.
I'm with Fusca right here. Yeah. It's like forgetability. Dude,
yes,
100%.
The Cloak of Forgetability. Yeah. So
I need that for my bard, like, where I'm like, goink, you know what? Don't worry about that one.
Exactly, right? And it became a conversation of like, this item is maybe too powerful. And so we're gonna like, we had like an out of game conversation. I was like, there's a curse attached to this where the more you use it, the more you begin to forget pieces of yourself. And so that created a balance. It wasn't in the original item. It was not in the original description, but we recognized as a table, something here is getting in the way of an even layer of fun for everyone. And so let's make some adjustments. That's all D&D is. Like, D&D is a negotiation at all points between players and DMs. So like, yeah, the whole like sweating of overbalancing or under tuning the balance of things, like, it's part of the game, just like lean into it.
You're right.
Break shit.
You're totally right. You should not be afraid of breaking something because it's a fake plate anyways, right? And can immediately be replaced. That's a good point. I think one, and I don't want to like harp on this forever, but I just find it really interesting, man. Like, with that example in mind, to what degree, I mean, are you only having that conversation with the rogue, like out of game? And then like for immersion purposes, and then beginning your session and justifying it, where the next time he uses it, he feels like a tense, almost like a scarlet fever rise at his neck, and then, and then as this curse just flares up briefly? Or like, how would you approach that?
Yeah, so I think in this case, it was an aside conversation. So we had set up like a group, like Discord, that we were, so, rather than kind of calling it out in front of everyone, it was a conversation between just me and this player of like, hey, this is something I'm feeling. Does this align with how you're interpreting this item and like how it's changed the game? Yes, great. Let's work through what this could look like. And players generally like seeing a little bit behind the curtain of like what the DM is thinking and like the mechanics of that. Like, that's part of the game, and I think that's part of the mystique for players, is not knowing what's behind the screen. So, in that way, it was also engaging for him to kind of see my thought process in designing the game, and then being a participant in finding a new way to desigine it so that it worked better for everyone.
Copy that.
So,
that's rad.
Yeah.
And
there have been cases. Oh yeah, sorry. I was just gonna say, I think there have been cases where like, I've said to the table, if like something didn't go the way I intended, or if something like truly blew up in my face, I've like maybe described what I'm feeling when that's happening. But I try to keep it to player and DM, because I don't want, not that I want it to be secret to anyone else, but I think you want to be, I don't know, like, not with folding, but like you want to keep some of that
mystery,
going
of
for
course.
like the larger game. Yeah,
1,000%. I mean, I think that balance that you're striking is really important and well explained, and it is essentially like having some mystery that isn't completely revealing in such a way that either it takes the fun out or it allows for like meta exploitation, while also being above board and just communicating like, hey, I'm being thoughtful about this. This isn't something that's just being slapped down each week. Like, this is how I intended it. You're very brilliantly, breaking it this way. Like, how do we feel about it? This is what I think a repercussion of that might be. That's totally great. The only thing I was going to add is just how much easier that is made by having a rogue that's just down for the cause and is like, yeah, man, actually, you know what? You're right. Like, I probably shouldn't just be able to like go up and just like, just give people wet willies and like rob them and then run off. But that is, not always the case, but of course made easier. You should hopefully be at a table where you can at minimum communicate well, person to person, human to human.
Yeah. This is me speaking personally. I think there's a big red flag if there's an adversarial vibe between the DM and the players.
Sure.
The collective of the table is to tell a good story. There's no winning D&D. There's no there's min-maxing, there's finding mechanics that break the game a little bit, but ultimately if the table is having the most fun when having fun. And so if someone is going to be adversarial in that, I think you have a bigger problem about the dynamics of your table beyond like this one item,
No, well put, especially if that's something you keep kind of bumping on a lot. That's amazing. Well, guys, I appreciate so much for rolling through. Root, good seeing you, Prince. Glad you made it back from that concert, dude. Good to see you in one piece. And appreciate all these questions, truly, guys. Before we dive into them, I do just want to acknowledge the fact that apparently Macronomicon is a professional baker. Yo, dude, what the fuck are you talking about? Are we just going to hit you with addresses? Is everybody about to drop their address and you're going to drop your Venmo in the chat and it's simple as that? Because
I will take muffins or whatever you take. Whatever is your...
I think they're pronounced muffins, but they do resemble the same shape and delicious texture. I mean, 3 to 4 pounds of chocolate, kid? Like, come on. Let's fucking go. Anyway. Hook us up on that. Let us know what goes down. Agreed with you, Fuzka. As mentioned, I mean, the Cloak of Forgettability is definitely worth breaking into in our own campaign. I think there's, especially after last week's session in my home game where they essentially treated what was meant to be a very serious RP kind of negotiation into a murder. So maybe we could use that and split it into 6 ways. Root asked a great question. How long did it take for you, 5e, to get comfortable implementing homebrew? Like, we've sort of touched on it, but was it something that came up out of necessity for you? Or was it just like one idea and you were like, I gotta put this in? Or was it something else?
So like my own homebrew, like things that I wrote?
Yeah.
It was kind of immediate, I think, actually. Again, because I was playing with friends, we were all new to the game at that point. And so no one really had any sort of idea of what like balance looked like.
That is a great line.
Yes.
Roll the hit. 36. Great.
Maybe, yeah. I think implementing my own homebrew was one thing. I think understanding the mechanics of the game enough to absorb and effectively implement someone else's homebrew was a different thing. I think I learned a ton and still learn a ton in reading other people's work and understanding like the small nuances in like the details of how they design something that like I think should be table stakes for like any designer, but like there's no real handbook to like what that looks like. So I think it's a little bit more difficult, and I think it's a little bit more difficult sussing out the quality and polish of another designer's work to another homebrewer's work. So that's, I think, where it gets a little bit trickier, a little bit murkier, and I think that just like comes with repetition, cycles, trying things out, watching them break, blow up in front of your face, adjusting, finding the balance, and like, it's but I don't think anyone should be afraid of like adopting any sort of homebrew item, whether it's their own, writing their own for the first time.
No, I mean, co-sign all of that, man, to the max. And it sounds like you really jumped in pretty immediately just in terms of like you being like, you know what, like that's kind of what brought me to the table. That's what I would find compelling as a player. And you're totally right that there's no teacher, just like experience, right, in terms of like repetition and just going for it. I mean, I would say on my end, two important kind of reference points were the fact that I'd started as a player for quite some time, had touched on 3rd edition, didn't really get a lot of experience, but like knew I loved 5th edition. And I think that really influenced the small amount of homebrew that I felt confident, or at minimum interested in adding. It wasn't even like homebrew. It was more just, this is so stupid. It wasn't truly even homebrew at the beginning. It was more just feeling confident adding encounters, adding plot points that weren't in the Dragon of Icespire Peak, which was I'm acting like I'm holding it up right now because I do that a lot. But like because I saw that, like, you know what, I think the Ranger would really find this compelling. Like, he runs into a centaur that is in the adventure book, and maybe as a sign of good faith, he's going to have like an archery contest where they're throwing different sized pieces of wood, shooting it. Super easy. But it was the type of thing where I was like, oh man, that'd be fun. And then I'll just make an increasing AC for like a smaller piece of wood, and then the last one's like spinning in the wind. It's hard to hit. Tight. And that, once it was successful, I remember this is like, oh, well, right. The other important part was that the first table I was playing with had, as a player, both a very good friend of mine, but the guy that was more or less like my first DM whenever I was a player. So I felt really confident, like kicking it at him afterwards, being like, yo, dude, like, what'd you think? Like, was that tight? Like, da-da-da-da. Because we also like write together, we shoot a lot together, like we're very creatively in sync. And he truly unprompted, like at the end, was like, John, that archery thing was rad. And I was like, oh, like, cool, you know, it worked. Like, this one thing worked.
That's so great.
You know what I mean? And you, of course, don't know until you go for it. But in general, whenever you, like, we're both named John, so I'll just say when you, John, you know, are interested or excited about something, you know, following the fun on that is almost always going to reward you, right?
I love the phrase "following the fun" because so the first campaign that I ran, similarly was it was for the Horde of the Dragon Queen, which I would hold that up, but I think I burned it because it's such a bad campaign.
Oh, I was about to ask. I didn't know. It was like, because you were like, it was just that level. Okay, you didn't like it sick.
No, it was.
Yeah, it was what did you like, real quick? Like, because I've heard of it, never played it.
Hard railroad, to the point where like the description said, and if your players do this other thing, make them do this instead. Like, it was like,
that's wild.
Absurd to read through.
That's wild.
And meanwhile, you know, naturally in D&D, and it was with a bunch of new players who had never played before. This was a bunch of my husband's friends who were interested in playing, and I was like, yeah, I'll put something together. And they naturally test the boundaries of everything and want to fuck around and find out and try different things, to the point where I started just like writing a different campaign session by session with them that had nothing to do with Horde of the Dragon Queen, because
out of necessity,
the threads that they were following were way more interesting, and it was way more creatively fulfilling for me as a DM to write for that than to say, well, in chapter 3 it says blah blah blah, like you know.
That's so great, man. And guys, thank you so much for these comments. I promise I'm going to get to them. That is so true. And I mean, I think in that sense, we're talking a lot about homebrew today, guys. This is Jon Aldric at 5e Trash, which, by the way, is his handle. I call him the Trash Man out of love, okay?
It's
out of love, okay?
I value that title.
The Trash also gets picked up every Wednesday, so it's appropriate that we're hanging out today. But for me, like in that homebrew jump, and it sounds a little bit like in that example, whenever you were running this adventure campaign where you were like, you know, I'm not crazy about it, but my characters are into this. Reskinning is the best. Like, that is truly, truly, truly where things really kind of started to like open up for me in terms of, I mean, not necessarily, I mean, I was confident, but more seeing the parallels where I'm like, oh, I don't even have to worry about balance, because all I'm doing is taking either a spell that exists, a monster mechanic that already exists, a lair action, whatever it would be, a magical item, and tweaking it tailoring it, right, to either fit the campaign, the storyline, or to fit the PC in a really complementary way. Exactly, Matt Bro. So, that is I think, can be a really easy way to kind of wade into it in terms of like getting into homebrew. And Matt Pro sort of touched on that as well in terms of being like, it kind of depends on the content being digested or whether or not it is an online game, an in-home game, in terms of how much you want to apply and how quickly. Yeah. Fusco goes, I'm playing with my best friends and family, so I'm thankfully comfortable with all of my homebrew. And we'll buy muffins, lol. Yeah, seriously. That goes for all of it. Dude, Root is currently crocheting, currently making some dice bags. Y'all, we are out here just like stunting. Let's go. Appreciate that. If there's a way, I appreciate, John, you dropping that link. We're going to like really highlight that at the end as well, because John has some incredible stuff out there. Tons of homebrew options. We're actually going to spend a chunk of time talking about the Necromancer class here in a second. But Root and Mapro, like, if y'all got links, you got the green light. Got the green light. Also, Fusca, please remind me, because I want to give you a shout out as we're sort of wrapping, to hopefully pull up a clip from that cheese section. I really was losing my mind. Okay, so I'm going to dive through some of these. The idea of making, the Necromancer subclass, John, was that something that, and what's up, Amon? Good seeing you, man. Appreciate you rolling through. But the Necro, was that something that, clearly you love Warlocks. I know that's like a very evocative, from a play style, from kind of a backstory. They're a very interesting class that evokes a lot of fucking opinions. But how did the Necromancer come to be? It's something, it's a school of magic, but it's not really a subclass. So, like, what did that look like in terms of a journey for you?
Yeah, so it is a subclass. It is a wizard subclass. Oh, and I think that's where I started off. So what I wrote was like a full ass class. Carpe,
thank you.
So like, no, you're good. So I think reading the subclass, it felt, I don't know, it's like fine for like a wizard subclass, but I felt like there's so much more flavor there. And I had just finished reading, there's a book called Gideon the Ninth, which is about necromancers in space. It's like this absurd lesbian fantasy book, but it's very fun. It's a great read for anyone who's looking for a new take on fantasy. Solid book. I loved how the author thought about schools of necromancy there, in like kind of like all of the different ways that it can be thought of, not only as like a damaging magic but also a healing magic, and then it really has to do with the balance of like 100%. Life and death and body and soul and all this stuff. And big Diablo 2 fan, Necromancer was like my jam.
That's cool.
There. So that's cool. Coming around to that, I really wanted to, I'd always wanted to write my own kind of full dedicated class. And I really loved the idea of finding a mechanic around balance. And so after reading the books, after kind of doing a little bit more research, I also had this book here called Death in the Afterlife, which is just like a really cool log of like everything from like plague doctors to like the history of death certificates to what is it, like ghost dances. And it's got like this idea, it like chronicles like all of these like ideas around death in the afterlife, like across multiple cultures. It's super cool,
dude. Hilarious. Plague doctor is about to be a subclass for sure.
I should think about that.
Like that's a wild ass. My first thought is of course like the classic like hook nose, the death bird or whatever. Like shit is evocative and weird. What's the, can we like, what is, can you just like can you kind of redirect a little of the knowledge of that book onto our heads right now? Like what is the,
So I do know that that mask, what would happen during the Black Plague, or the reason it was designed in such a way was that it was, the beak of it was stuffed with like, potpourri and incense and things that were thought to ward off the
disease.
Plague. And so it was, so that was why it was shaped in such a way, was to kind of seal the face and combat the like human rot around you with potpourri.
Dude. That's buck wild. I mean,
yeah, there's like,
yeah,
my favorite piece in there actually. It's called. There's a term called sin eater, and a sin eater was in the 1800s someone who would absorb the sins of a dead person, so to speak. The idea was that you would find someone who was like considered like a social derelict, pay them a lot of money, and they would eat a meal over the body of
what
a corpse, and it was an idea of them ingesting that person's sins so that they could go to heaven. And so you were basically saying, pay me $100, I will eat a snack next to your dead friend, and that way I absorb his sins, and then he goes to heaven. And it was like this absurd concept that was like going on for hundreds of years, and they were seen as like these like
as an actor that has done worse for $100, let me guarantee you that I would be standing over there, preferably with one of Mappernomicon's muffins in my hand. But I would absolutely take that job on. I mean, can you imagine how absurd that is?
You get a free
bizarre.
lunch, $100,
and the sins of your father. Yeah, I mean that is absolutely
small price to pay.
So you're reading in this book. You're seeing that it's a school of magic like subclass within the wizard, but you feel like there's more for that, and that's rad, man. Like, have you gotten a chance to play it yet, or is there like a necro? I mean, I know you've probably play tested it and whatnot, but is that something that's immediately kind of come to life in your campaigns by way of a PC or an NPC? I'm more just curious.
Yeah, so I have not actually. I played tested it myself, and I hired some play testers to run through multiple cycles of it. The same play testers who do stuff for like Arcadia, for like MCDM, and like a couple other things. So like, you know what they're doing. They gave me some very detailed notes about things I got very wrong, and I fixed them. But yeah, so I've used the Necromancer class for one-shots and things like that. There's something a little bit weird when someone else is running a game and me being like, I want to play my thing in your game. And like, I don't know. So like,
okay,
I really didn't make it for me. I would say I think I made it hoping that other people would adopt it and enjoy it. And I have actually gotten a couple people like hit me up on Twitter being like, hey, by the way, I played this and I loved this.
Sick.
This was really weird. This didn't work the way I thought it would, but I see why you did this. So that's really why I made it. Made it. It's something I would love to play more of, but I made it, for others.
No, dude, that's legit. I mean, I feel like very, very thoughtful, and I'm immediately being like, oh, because I don't know if I would have even thought of that, but I totally get that, because it's, I mean, I think especially whenever you are a DM, you recognize that like how much as a DM, typically you're kind of like trying to think as if you were your players, right? Like, damn, what would the fighter enjoy here, or like what can be a interesting way to test the wizard with this encounter, or whatever it would be. And then of course there's obviously like backstory stuff where you're plugging into your campaign situations, whatever. But it's I feel like always interesting whenever I am playing at someone else's table now, especially as I gain more and more experience, and especially as I get to kick it with really rad experienced DMs and learn from them, has been just really wanting to be a constant positive influence, to like make it easier on the DM, to like to confirm their solid choice, or further the action through some cool choice of my own. Now obviously like I want to be genuine about it and like play through my character's eyes and all that normal stuff, but I just think the more you play as a DM, the more you kind of recognize the ways that you can kind of like pick up and help, which is just being a good player, you know what I mean? Like, it's just being a good player, right? Like, period. Yeah, man. Amon, appreciate you, dude. Amon says that they repainted, like reskinned some undead monsters to mask jesters, and then animated their new masks.
Ooh,
pretty cool.
That.
Pretty cool. Dude, okay, great. Root, send me some Discord pics of the crochet bags. I want everyone to know I do have access to the crochet dice bags, okay? It's there. It is possible. An agreed map or regional cheese might be a new forthcoming Twitch segment. If we can bring 5e back, we'll just call it the regional cheese and trash section. So, John, let me ask you, man, like, we're now, I mean, because you're clearly so good at homebrew. I feel like you're a really thoughtful guy in terms of your sessions, how you go through your world building. I always really enjoy asking DMs about their session 0 and their prep process. So can we talk about that a little bit? Like what session 0 looks like for you? And just with the caveat being, because I have the feedback I've gotten from a ton of people has been that is oftentimes the most intimidating aspect. Like is a lot of times new DMs will be like, I didn't run a session 0. I just kind of like started. And it's in talking to them where I'm like, oh, well, did you read about it? Like, did you think about it? And it feels like oftentimes that the session 0 feels overwhelming and vague. And I'm just curious, like what your experience was, your first session 0 versus what you would do if you were, running one tomorrow.
Yeah. So I think the first, I mean, that's a big question.
Yeah, sorry, that was an 18-minute question.
No, you're good. You're good. Actually, I'll let me pull something up.
Wow. Oh, dude, you're countering with a document? Let's go.
Yes. Because I actually found it. I found it in like my archives when I first started running my campaign that I've been running for 3 years now.
Heck yeah.
Let me find it. So this is by no means, I think, what every player or new DM or veteran DM should feel the need to prepare. But I think there are a couple things that kind of come to mind when it comes to a session 0. I'm gonna share my screen. Hopefully this. Oh, can you enable screen sharing?
Dude, that's so. I actually might not be able to because this is a shared Zoom account. Like one of my. Hang on.
I think if you go into the
settings, share screen. Scooby.
Yeah.
You can definitely drop it into Discord, and I can share that easily. Oh, you want to be able to share your desktop?
Yeah.
Oh. Ooh. Advanced. Dude, I don't know if I have this as an option. Sorry, I just got held up trying to create my reaction skin tone. Full screen maximize sheep. Dude, I'm so sorry. You got me, dude. You doinked me. Oh shit. So sorry, I was not quite ready. Did not mean to drop that either. My bad. Goofing it. But I can, if you want, you can drop it into Discord if you'd like.
Participants. I'd rather not drop it into Discord.
Sure, of course not. Of course not, man. Of course, totally fine.
Yeah. One last effort. If you open up participants at the bottom of Zoom, does it show things that you're able to enable for people?
Say that one more time because I was adjusting the OBS because I'd goofed it. I'm so sorry.
So if you go into Zoom and then under next to chat you have participants.
Sure.
This is really thrilling stuff for everyone in the audience.
This is my shiz right here.
If you open that drop down, is there something that allows like participants can't share screen?
Dude, it does not. I do not have a drop down option. I hate that.
Dang. All right.
Can you screenshot it? Can you screenshot it and chat it to me? I'll be damned if we get bested by the tech.
So, long story short, the last session 0 that I ran which was like 3 years ago. I think first off, like a big topic that comes up is
share screen? Yeah, I know.
I don't know. Okay, we'll power through it. Cool. So the first thing I think that comes up a lot that is, I think, an important consideration for every table are safety tools. It can feel like an awkward thing, especially if it's like close friends. And something that maybe you are like, I should skip this.
You're like, duh. But
there have been times where we haven't used safety tools at our table, and a friend of mine who I trust and love crossed a boundary with me, or I've done the same to them, and it's totally understandable and fine, and it was no point that like reduced trust, but it didn't match the way that I wanted to play the game, or vice versa.
Well put.
And so I do think having safety tools is always valid. Yes. I think if you like, there are tons out there. I don't have any specific recommendations, but Google D&D safety tools, and they're great questionnaires that just like allow you to set the tone that's going to match everyone's needs. The last session 0 that I ran, I prepared 4 core documents that I gave to all the players. The first one was recent events, and so like talking about what's going on in the city that you're starting off in, and kind of like a couple different mystery threads that they could pull on, like the main river that runs through the city, the water keeps descending a little bit each day, and that's the source of life in this like desert city. Or let me look at what like there was a military draft of mages because like the Warforged army has been depleted because the Warforged were like granted full autonomy and we're no longer like forced into the life of soldiers. Or like sand pirates attack this night every month, and things like that. And so like it gave little nuggets, and that was like I think enough for players to think about what is my perspective on this world around this draft of mages, around the kind of economy of the city, around like the safety of the city, or things like that. The next one I gave, which was I think very specific to the setting, was like PDF on like here are all of the gods and titans of like this world, and like it came down to like what do they represent, what is their alignment, what are common symbols and icons for them, and I think that like allowed players to think about like their religious involvement, and some were like not religious at all, and it gave I think a little bit more like kind of like that like broad strokes big world history around like the legends of these gods and things like that.
Got you. And we're talking about right now like session 0 prep. Essentially Jon has created, first was talking about just touch points. I mean, more or less getting consent with your table. I have found that's great to use for a Google document as well, because people can then be anonymous, can also like type responses as well as rate them. But it sounds like you additionally, whenever you're starting this other campaign, had more or less a Google document that was like bringing them up to speed, recent events, and some other things. That's crazy, man. And sorry to interrupt you, Jon. I was more just bringing.
Oh no, you're good. Yeah. And then the last thing outside of like the mechanics of like here are like the accepted like playable races and classes, and like here, blah blah blah.
Don't be a dragon.
I think building out. I think I built out like 15 different factions within the city that they might be involved with. And so like
very cool.
I think between like recent events, like the sort of gods and like broad world lore, and then like different factions and their motivations, I think that was a lot of content that was I think fairly like high level. Like it was like each god or faction or recent event was like no longer than a paragraph. But it was enough for players to really start to mix and match a lot of these pieces to figure out what worked for them. And I think engage with the lore in a way that was going to build a character that like made sense. Because I think really the ultimate goal of session 0 is like you're laying out like your thesis for the players. So this is the vision of the story that I have, and these are the parameters that I want you to feel engaged with. And I think that can feel like a very tricky thing to get right, because a lot of session 0 from like a lore and character building perspective can feel dictatorial. It can feel you're like really just like,
this is what the world is, this is how we're doing it. Got you, dude. Jon, that is very well put. And just so I'm understanding this correctly, like I mean, obviously you give flexibility to your players like within certain constraints in terms of playable races, whatever it would be. Excuse me. But do you then, like, as they're building their characters, almost like before the session 0 is whenever you hit them with a brief document, whatever it would be, kind of just like letting them know what the world in the space will look like?
Yes. Amazing. Yeah. So they got those ahead of time, and then I don't think there's any sort of like hard mechanics of the session 0 beyond safety tools. I think there was a piece like thinking about your relationship with other characters. And I think something I said was like every character should at least know of one other character at the table. And I think that was a really engaging way again, these are all pieces and components that the players can then engage, like pick which ones they want to engage with, whether it's like components of each other's backstories, components of factions, of gods, of events. And I think that gives a lot of building blocks for people to collaboratively yes and the kind of thesis of like the campaign that you're laying out.
Dude, that's
so I think, yeah,
that's good. It's really empowering too, right? And hopefully makes it even easier on you as a DM by kind of preemptively bringing everybody to a limited, like to at least the same speed. And then after that, if they want to go faster, slower, cool. Completely agree, man. Especially whenever you're trying to tie in characters, that can be super helpful. That's amazing. So, yeah, dude, that can be a hard balance at first. The very first campaign I ever ran, I did not connect the characters, and it was a mistake. I mean, just because I was like, don't worry, like I got this. This is gonna be like an immersive world. It's a sandbox, dude. I'm still, it's all good. And I really did. I was so afraid of railroading at all. And sometimes that can just create shared experiences with strangers. And that's, I mean, it's a conceit that we move past. If everyone at the table knows each other and they're comfortable, that's not a problem at all. But it's not as good as it could be. And what you're doing is empowering your players with information, right? Like in improv, we call that gift giving. Like it's like if we're doing improv and you walk on first and I walk up, I'm like, man, that is a nice tuxedo. All of a sudden I've like put you in a tuxedo, you look good, your status is high, like bam. And with providing your players for information, even just in a limited sense, in terms of what the world looks like, you're helping them, you're helping yourself, like as a DM. That's rad. Thank you so much for dropping the... there's also apparently a muffin link in the Discord, guys. Let's go! I'm so pumped on that. Okay, cool. Well, muffins are about to be popping off up in this thing. I can guarantee you that. So, Jon, we talked a little bit about, you prepping for sessions, or excuse me, you like running your session zeros. What would it look like for you to like prep it in between? Like, what does it look like now if you've had your session zeros, you've done your safety protocols, right? And now let's say maybe you're on, session 3, 4, 5. And with just the caveat of, I have gotten the feedback from a lot of DMs, especially those that like, okay, I got some great backstories. I weaved it into my campaign. However, we're now 3 or 4 sessions in and it feels like a whole new campaign. How do you incorporate that? Like, what does that kind of look like for you in between sessions?
Yeah, I think that's a big one. I think when I'm thinking about I keep saying that as a way of, anyway, when I think about, when I think about the work that I'm doing in between sessions, I think the biggest pitfall that a DM can run into is like getting really sunken into their own lore and the story that they're looking to tell.
Yes.
At a granular level. When I wrote the campaign that I've been running for 3 years, I wrote what I wanted to end at the end of Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 of the campaign, and I wanted to like hit those notes eventually.
Yes, Poppy, yes,
and then
let's go.
Figure out whatever pieces snake them to that. And if they went in a completely different direction, sure, we'll follow that thread instead.
Yeah.
But I think a big thing that the DM should remember when planning their next session is, what did the players learn in the last session? What did they do? And what are they most attached to in the game at this moment? And I think those 3 pieces will help DMs make sure that
repeat them for me, Jon.
Yeah.
Can you say them again? What they're most attached to?
What did they do? What did they learn? And what are they most attached to?
Interesting.
And that could be like characters in their backstory. That could be themes that they seem to be cycling around, or kind of conspiracies that they're starting to like thread as a group about what they think might be going on. Those are all things that the DM, I think, should be very like attuned to and responding to, right? So I think a great case is, my campaign had this like mysterious shadow organization called The Hand. Very original name.
I love it though. Let's go.
They were starting to, I think by like session 5, they were starting to assemble who they thought those 5 figures were. And I had planned who those 5 figures were, and they had thrown in three people who were not originally part of that design, but they had really good reasoning, and they had created plans on how to figure out and like assess if those people were it. So I was like, yeah, that I see where you're going with this, and I'm going to yes and it, because based on the information that I've provided to you so far, this is what you think, and I don't have a good reason to say no, you got it wrong, because you're reading tea leaves that I'm handing you. Like, you're making interpretations based off fake information.
It's almost like yeah, sorry.
No, keep going.
Well, that is extremely well put, and it's almost like the way you just described it, it's almost like a bit of telephone back and forth, right? Where it's almost like I am seeing like an elephant for the first time, and I'm like, oh my god, and I'm like describing it to you, but you don't see the elephant, and then
so
exactly, you're drawing it right, or you're taking notes or whatever, and then it's as if I am then walking around and you are describing to me, and I'm kind of like, interesting, like that's not what the trunk looks like, but that's a cool trunk. Maybe we should use that trunk. That's amazing, man. Because what? Okay, so I want to actually put a brief pin in that, because where we're at right now is a very great layout of a overarching homebrew campaign, where you are viewing it in the classic act structure, right? 1, 2, 3. Although Shakespeare used 5, ill-advised. We'll treat it as 3. But like 1, 2, 3, I do the same thing, and you have a loose kind of vision of whatever the final beat or the final moment or what is the world-shaking event could look like, right? But then you're also describing just being a good listener, someone that is like playing with other people to collaboratively tell a story, i.e. D&D. And I think it is an important truth to remember that, like, we cook up all this homebrew, right? We make these decisions. Some of them I like to roll for. Some of them are decisions that are made by, our players. But with something that is an aspect of your creation, if it has not made it to the table during a session yet, I feel like there's 2 camps. There's DMs that are like, well, like I still wrote it and it's canon, or DMs that are like, well, like I know what I was going for, but because it hasn't made it to the table yet, I'm gonna pivot it from my own canon and reskin it to better fit this moment, or better fit something that, like, it's the same thing as like being, you always had a curse befitting some NPC, but then they fall in love with another NPC, and therefore you kind of pivot the deciding action to somebody that the party is more attached to. But what are your thoughts on that, man? Because I feel like that can be such a hard thing to balance. And after that, I promise you I'm going to dive into these comments.
No. Yeah. So like, I'm trying to remember who I was listening to. I was listening to someone's like YouTube channel about like the act or work of being a DM, and he said something. He's like, I don't understand why people think there's a major difference between canon that I pre-wrote and was like sitting on my couch with snacks and just kind of like riffing by myself, and canon that I write in the moment with the players. And there's no inherent value that I need to stick to one over the other. Like, that is always my choice as the DM. Like, there is no concrete piece that you suddenly need to commit to. Like, it is about designing a shared experience at the table. And so there have been cases where like my players have gone one route, and I've decided that that's not for the game, or like that's not for the story that we're collectively telling, and find ways of showing them that they're wrong, but also teaching them something that puts them back on the right track. And then there have been times where I'm like, yeah, we're gonna go down this thread instead, and you're right because I'm deciding in this moment that you're right, because none of this is real. I'm either writing it myself or we're collectively writing it. Like, it's not...
Totally. And is that... Because I feel that, and that answers the question really well, but to like dive a little bit more into it, is that something that is, like, for you try to impartially examine relative to the story? Or is it something that's more just like gut, beat to beat? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think I try to think about... I think it's a balance of like the state that the game is in that moment, of like what's going to be fun and engaging for the players, and also like what is going to make sense for the story. I think there's a case where like they came up with this really big grand conspiracy behind like who is behind the hand and like who's behind that person and things like that like was very that I knew the set pieces that I had prepared just would not match for that, and it would end up not adding up in a way that was satisfying for the story. And so that was the point where like, okay, how do I put pieces in play to steer them towards like the conclusion that I want them to go to, while it also still feels like they're discovering key information. Yeah.
Got you.
So I think it's a blend.
No, that's very well answered. I mean, because you do have to. That's different than like changing one element, right? Like you're not going to restructure 3 things just because the barbarian got a hunch. You know what I mean? Like the pieces weren't there for that. Maybe they could misconstrue it and they're actually drawing some reasonable conclusions, but they're incorrect. Like that happens all the time in life. And honestly, for me, is equally immersive. Like sometimes my players will toss out a really great theory, but it's just wrong. You know, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, that's dope. It maybe would have been dope, but I mean, that ain't it, you know? That's well done, Jon. I mean, that can be hard to find. And I think that for people that are homebrewing, especially a campaign and an entire plot arc and movement, can feel a little bit overwhelmed or like hard to know when. But I think if you do at minimum have those 3 touchstones of like beginning of first act, what is that big moment? Beginning of second act, what is that big moment? And then like, what do you view like the rough approximation of the end of the campaign being? Judging your own pivoting session to session, as long as it's just within the ley lines of those plot points, man. Like that's what it's really about. So I appreciate you laying that out. That's totally it. Aman says that preparations often help with these kinds of questions. He's more talking about the consent stuff, and 100%, man. I mean, communication, prep in general. It's going to be super duper helpful. I appreciate y'all's patience while we tried to steal Jon's ideas live on the shared screen. I've actually run into that before. It's basically a good buddy that I share this Zoom account with, and I rarely need the share screen, but I will text him about that. So it's all about that. Gabby, thank you for coming through. I don't know if you're still here. Hope you are. Hope you're a D&D player? DM? I never really know. I'm Carpe the DM. I love hanging out with the D&D peeps, sort of sharing the space, trying to learn from them, trying to maybe add to my own campaign as a DM. We're here with @5eTrash, Jon Aldric, very talented content creator and DM himself. And we're mostly talking about homebrew, but we're really just kind of now moving into what it takes, like moving, session to session, DM to DM, or beat to beat, rather. That's so great. Amon says, I had a player that didn't like to have these, I think, session zeros, and we talked about it in session 0. Fears can be harsh. Yeah, totally, man. Totally. And Mapro just said that they dropped the safety tools in the Discord. Let's go. So anybody that wants that as sort of a preset, as something they can copy and paste, thank you so much. I assume that's in the general tab of my Discord. Thank you for giving me a reason to plug it, Mapro. You're the man, dude. Appreciate you coming through. To reiterate, there is a link to buy chocolate chip muffins also in the Discord. So it's out there, dude. It's an option. Jon, you're a click away. I feel like these things are about to sell out. So as soon as I am not going to do it until after the session, but I will be disappointed if I'm still able to buy them. Except no, I won't, because then I'll get some fucking muffins. Okay, that is so good. Mapro, that's great. Carpe's energy is how I approach meeting strangers in the grocery store when they have questions about food. Cool, man. I'm choosing to take that as a compliment, unless it's a note. In which case,
I think that's huge. I think. You have a very welcoming, enthusiastic presence.
Thank you, brother.
So I feel like I could talk to you about D&D or food.
Yeah, it is an either or. I mean, you can keep adding to the list. And truly, Jon, I just appreciate it, man, because I followed you on Twitter for a long time, and I've just enjoyed your content. I've enjoyed your style of humor, but it is another level to be able to hear it live and to be able to ask questions off of it. Just because you're a really thoughtful guy that clearly puts a lot of just preparation and a lot of consideration into how they approach it. And that's awesome, man. It's like really shines through. Amazing. Gabby says, my setting is in basically a world that's 167 years after magical nukes destroyed the world. What should I include in my handout for players before the game? Wow. So Johnny, I'd be happy to take that one first. Do you have an immediate response and reaction?
That's first of all.
Yeah, we're both like, whoa. Sign us up.
Love magical nukes. I have dystopian nightmares just about every night, so that really feeds into that.
100%.
But no, you go first, and then I'll throw in my own thoughts.
Like I a lot of my kind of day job is I'm a tutor, and I'm also do a lot of like digital editing, copy editing, and some of that is putting together pitch decks, right, and gathering images and stuff. And I have really enjoyed the idea of creating a pitch deck that is sort of like a session zero. And so just the idea of creating like a Stanley Kubrickian kind of imagery of what would it look like, what would a magical nuke war look like? I assume it's I mean, like my handout on this would contain a lot of lore on why, like, or brief bits. I mean, I assume it was teams of high-level wizards, right, that were getting together and sometimes, like in some cases, sacrificing multiple 7th, 8th, 9th level spell slots at the same time to concentrate energy. I'm not sure if that was necessarily through one device, if we're kind of treating it like it's a conceit in the world that casters can just link up and that gives them access to like level 18, 19, 20 level spells, in this world. So I would probably spend some time explaining how the world came to be to reach that tipping point, right? Because like in our own global experience, we've had those moments, right? Whether it's the Cuban Missile Crisis, whether it's the Cold War, and not to like drag geopolitics into it, but oftentimes those situations are the egos of a handful of men, and it is oftentimes a very precarious interplay between resource, between perceived danger. So if we're saying it's a world, Gabby, where this went wrong, what was it? Was it between elf and drow? Was it between warlock and wizard? Like, who were these two camps that were so inflexible that they ended up going nuclear? So that would be kind of my like initial kind of reactions. But what would you say, Trash? I just called you Trash.
Yeah.
Give me a break. Why did I?
No.
Is that cool?
No, please continue to call me Trash.
Yo, what's your thoughts, Trash?
So, yeah. The first thing, I'm going to throw a link actually into
please.
The Discord or the Twitch chat.
Yeah. Do either one.
Great. So it's is that there we go. Okay, so in the Discord, or in the Twitch rather, I threw in a link. There's actually this really cool idea that a bunch of environmental designers are trying to think about in designing a space that will last for 10,000 years to warn future cultures.
Wait a minute. Wait. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry to cut you off. I lost it for a quick second. Does this exist?
This exists. So this is a concept. This is a sort of design challenge that is under discussion in the design space around designing an environment that outlasts any given language or any other kind of known communication style to warn future cultures that a place is dangerous and radioactive. Say like in the Chernobyl environment, right? That's going to be radioactive for 10,000 years. We don't know how to communicate that in a lasting way. So I think thinking about what are the artifacts of previous cultures that have lasted and how do those get misconstrued? I think about magic items or mundane items that no one actually knows their original intent, or there are like entire...
Like the Cloak of Billowing or something like that.
Yes, yeah. And like understanding what significance or insignificance those held in previous cultures, because I'm imagining a lot of records are lost. I mean, all D&D races are based around humans, which are kind of vocal historians, and that's how we trade a lot of our knowledge is through not one-to-one knowledge sharing. I think about the types of governments and the types of social structures that would rise afterward. And so when you think about like building out factions or ideals that your players might be engaging with, there could be like you were kind of pointing out, like major authoritarian efforts that are rising up. There could be kind of peaceful nomadic cultures that are kind of moving about. the lands, and thinking about what are all of the pieces that are trying to vie for power while they slowly rebuild a global culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. And lastly, I will just kind of plug,
yes,
you should throw in the Necromancer class in there, because it sounds like you're dealing with a lot of like balance of life and death. And so if that's something you're interested in, let me know. I'll send you a free copy.
That's sick. Come on. That's dope. That's a great idea too, John. Like, I love that. I mean, it's a great way to think about it in terms of like, yeah. And Aman has a great point where he's just saying, like, in 40 years, I mean, like, the deviation of language, right, of even the written word could be such that, I mean, you know, listening every known language might not be enough to communicate danger, stay away. I mean, even just like the deviation of sort of, you know, the English language in the Americas versus in the UK and the Commonwealth, like, it is, I mean, it's already quite deviant, but I mean, in another 100 years, it will be almost like two separate languages. I think it's more than 100, but that's what it's on pace for in terms of the lexicon, you know, kind of the vocabulary, the reference points. That's so amazing. Gosh, that's really well put. Well, Gabby, thank you for coming through and sharing that. I'm going to read through some of these comments because I think you actually answered one of my questions as I was sort of laying it out. Root also says that, oh yeah, I can crochet a dice bag in 2 to 4 days. Kid, if you want a dragon scale, my boy, give me 3 to 5 weeks to learn the pattern, bro. Like, yeah, I think I want a dragon scale. Like, that's, I can't believe that all those words line up to make sense, and I tracked on all of them. I'm with all of them. Aman goes, notes are my best friend, a tool to use during games, 100%. I mean, even as a player, I think it's really important to take notes. John, can I ask real quick, like, I'm a big note taker. I mean, obviously as a DM, sounds like Aman is as well. I assume you probably are too. Do you find, like, are you the type that as soon as the session ends, you need to jot some stuff down? Or are you more like, are you more kind of when inspiration strikes, like at 2:30 in the morning? Or is it like, no, I need it to be 4 hours before the session and then my juices get pumping, you know? Or is it something else? Obviously, that's an option too.
Yeah. So I'm a terrible note taker, actually. I am good at planning out notes for the coming session. But I will be honest, we do a lot of heavy drinking over the course of our games, and by the end of a session, I'm not
your boy's
in a state
zooted
to take coherent notes. Yes. There was a while where one of my players was actually a very diligent note taker, and I would buy him like beers every session because I'm like, thank God that you're taking all these notes. Yeah. But I think the in the time between sessions, what I usually do is when I'm falling asleep or when I'm like closing my eyes for the night, I will begin thinking about what I think is going to happen in the next session. And if something strikes me, I'll like jot it down on my bedside table right there, actually.
Let's go. That's where it happens. Let's go.
Yeah. This is where the magic happens. So I'll jot it down, and I'll usually kind of take passive notes over the course of the week, thinking about ideas and things like that. And then I actually have a session in 2 hours after this.
Oh, cool.
So right after this, I'm going to like cram through everything that I think might be missing. But I'm also like a big outliner. Like, I'm like, these are the things, this is the information and activities that will be presented to the players.
Sure.
But like, that'll probably only capture the first 45 minutes. And then from there, we're going to just yes and kind of figure it out. And like, unless we're in like a mapped out dungeon, it's fairly loose. So yeah, I would say that's the ramblings of how I usually prep.
That's an important distinction. And Aman, Root, Mapro, Gabby, I mean, Fuzka, I mean, we have so many DMs in the chat. I appreciate you guys rolling through, truly. I think that is an important distinction, and please give me your opinion on this. I'm about to ask you about it, Johnny. But I feel like in terms of that level of prep, in terms of full build out versus more or less like bullet pointing, for lack of a better word, I think it's really, really like a skill unto itself, because there are certain situations, and maybe I can just give an example. I mean, like my party for many sessions, for about the past like 6 sessions now, has been in the city of Sundabar, We're very much running like a lot of what I've lifted is from a third edition.
I've been there.
Adventure
It's great in the summer.
Yeah, totally, man, totally. Great place to buy some cheap goods. Maybe get a knife in the back, but it's so. They were more or less going there. I had a lot of kind of front end points that I needed to set in motion, right? That then would either pique interest, potential hooks that they would be then sunk in. I also more just wanted to map out the who, the what, the why, because I needed it to be efficient. Like I needed to not be reaching for who this person is in power with and who they're related to and what that interchange looks like, right? And so I found that those sessions where I was, getting them down was a little more time intensive and a little more specific in terms of I'm writing like a full-on page and a half, 2 pages that I'm then consulting during the session. Everybody's going to be different. That's my process. It works really well for me. However, the past 2 sessions have been the party going into this leisure club, more or less breaking in to get someone that they think has been kidnapped and get them out. Dude, we all know where this is going. Any DM knows that this is about to be a motherfucking shit show. And of course it was, in the best of ways. Such a blast. But I felt, it became then for me in those moments to really just bullet point the vibe of each room. The people that work there, their names, what their vibe is, the things that have happened, as opposed to really trying to control the action or in any way game plan, because I don't know if they're going to go in through the front door, the back, if they're coming in blasting, lying, persuading. And I want to be open and flexible. And so, I don't know. I can you speak to that at all? Because I truly feel like that is a skill unto itself that DMs have to learn to hone.
I think the biggest thing that new DMs are mistaken on is that their D&D notes should match a Wizards of the Coast official campaign outline of things going on, right? Wizards of the Coast writes incredibly detailed stuff, and that is because they are trying to cater to as many tables as possible and how those tables might respond to that information. You as the DM do not need to write that much. You do not need to be that methodical and pre-planned in all of those set pieces. When I'm planning, I think, an environment that the players are going to be in, I will maybe have a map if it's necessary. I will think about a couple points of entry, like you were saying, are they going to go in the back? Are they going to go in the front? And I will write quick descriptors of maybe 3 to 5 NPCs and maybe grab a list of 5 to 10 items that they might find, and some of which might be really solid items, some of which might be fairly mediocre. And think about, this is really my toy chest of pieces that I can pull in to help the players engage, right? But I do not need to say the barmaid is roaming, in this spot, and then every 10 minutes she goes up to this room, and if the players don't hit her, at that point, they're gonna miss her. These are all toys in my toy box that I can just plop in to kind of respond to how the players are engaging with the content or engaging with the game, right?
And then it really just becomes about tracking which toys you've pulled out, right? Because then it's okay, cool, these toys are out. Also, these toys didn't get touched, so dope. I'm gonna make sure I note that, because I can pull them out later, and now they're new, even though I've already done the work and made them.
Exactly.
I love that, man. That's rad. Gabby goes, I'm a DM. Rad. Pitch deck. Pitch deck is essentially a brief encapsulation of either a television show or a movie or an ad campaign, but it's oftentimes gathering a lot of still frame images and just brief copy. It's kind of hard to describe, but a pitch deck for The Godfather would be, a lot of men in suits. Oh yeah, please.
No, I saw they recently released the pitch deck for the original Stranger Things season.
No way, I bet that's sick.
So cool to read through. It's mostly it stayed true to that pitch deck. Wow. But you can see there are a couple different threads that they had that ended up not playing out, or that they morphed into other things. It was really, really cool.
That's I would love to check that out. I mean, I'm sure that's just a quick Google away. That's a great reference point. Yeah, especially if you're familiar with Stranger Things, that would give you a great feel for what is happening there in terms of what a pitch deck serves the purpose of. That's amazing. Gabby also says, it's funny, I was asking this question. She says her gnomes are basically a Cold War warring with elves. I see. Okay. So it sounds like the gnomes and the elves ended up going nuclear to a magical degree. Well, I mean, I feel like both our interests are piqued, so feel free to just let us know. Gnomes were ruled by the wealthy, and the elves were a democratic socialist society. Wow, it's like that, huh? So it's just about cash, dude.
I would have assumed the other. I don't mean to typecast elves, but I feel like the elves are kind of the aristocratic.
There you go.
Yeah.
Maybe we're just doing a little flip, flop, and reverse. I love that. And thank you so much. John dropped in more or less a 50-cent version of the Necromancer class right there. I mean, dude, I'm 100% going to be going through that. I feel like the least I can do is kick you 50 cents.
Go for it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. Okay, so John, let me ask you, man. Like, we've talked so much. You clearly create some great homebrew. We talked about the process, the session 0 process. One thing I always like to ask, and this is like maybe a bit of a selfish question because it's something I definitely do, but do you ever roll for events in between sessions? Does that make sense? Like, are you able, like, let's say like maybe not like the big bad, but maybe like, I don't know what the example would be. Like there's a conflict and 2 orcs get away. And now they're heading back to this area where it's sort of controlled within the Lurkwood by a group of orcs. Do you roll for their success getting back? Or I mean, that's a bad example because orcs they know how to handle that area. They'd probably be high in survival. They would probably make it back. But sometimes I like to roll because it takes the pressure off me as a DM arbitrarily deciding. And I always just like to ask DMs if that's something they do or...
So I love that. I do not do that. I try to keep track of everything that happens like off screen, and I really think of that as like another toy in my toy box, or like a Schrodinger's cat type of approach of like what the players don't know could be anything. And I really I think of dice rolling as it's really this point of tension at the table. That is the value of dice. And I mean, I think using it for like game design decision making outside also totally makes a lot of sense, and I think is interesting. But I find that like if I were to do that, I know that I personally would, as I'm rolling the die, know which way I would want it to go, or know how I would want it to write, and I'd probably write it that way anyway.
No doubt.
That's my lack of principles in
well, that's following the fun. Like in those situations, like hell yeah, for sure. No, that makes sense.
So
man.
I don't personally do that, but I do love the idea of that. I think that's rad.
I can't remember what got me off like heading that direction. It was one thing where I genuinely didn't know what would happen, and I think I also didn't truly have a preference. So there was a little bit of that where I was like, all right, I mean, I guess I'll just give him a DC 13, strength saving throw, and that'll determine whether or not he gets out of this. And it more just opened up a whole area of approach where for me as a DM, it felt very true to the spirit to letting the dice tell the story. And it also maybe like took a little pressure off me to be able to be like, dude, I'm sorry, man. Like he didn't make it back home, it was one of those things like but you're absolutely right. If it's anything that is like a important aspect or something that I have a powerful opinion about, I'm just going to write it. Like I'll lean into that because I think it makes sense. And if it's reasonable, then for sure. That's super rad. Mapro says that he is a great word taker, lol, and hopefully by the end of it, they make it into a note. That sounds potentially like some of these sessions, John. Like that's definitely how I can get if I'm like imbibing or if I'm like on half an edible or something like that. I can sometimes go back and have jotted down things, and you're like, oh yeah, shit, goblin, sad, mushroom, Christmas. Wait a minute.
Yes. Yeah.
What was
Goblin
that?
Bedroom eyes. What does this mean? What is this for? Yeah.
Yeah. My paladin found a pouch of magical beans, a bag of beans, which I'm still waiting to like absolutely derail the campaign. And may. But it's so funny to me anytime I'm making like a bean note because I forget that she has them, and I'm like, what the? Oh, the beans. of course.
Oh, the beans.
The beans.
Yeah.
The beans need to be tracked and pulled forth. That's so good. Amon says they try to think about all the possibilities and sort of run them out. That's awesome. That's amazing.
I would have a whole tab in my like OneNote for like just the beans.
Dude.
Have you used OneNote for
no,
like campaign writing?
No, is it collaborative with your players?
It's not. It's
okay, cool.
So it's just like Microsoft's like Notes app, but like it's a little bit more freeform than like a Word document or like a Google Doc, and it's free. And so like you set up like it's on my other screen here. So like I have my whole DM Bible and it's got a tab for like the Pantheon, important NPCs. I have my players sheets that I haven't updated in multiple years. Like a calendar of events.
Within the campaign.
And then it's got like, yes.
Sick.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And then it's got like campaign session by session notes of like what I'm planning to run and then what actually happened. And I find it very helpful because I think like, I don't know, like there's so many pieces to keep track of. And so I like that it's a little bit more, I don't know, compartmentalized than I think a lot of other note-taking apps. So
Root says that they use Notion. Have you heard of that as a...
Notion's great. I actually want to transition over to Notion.
Okay,
it's a little bit more, I think there's a harder learning curve to like using Notion, but it's really solid.
Is it? Okay, I appreciate that because I do so much writing on Pages and Scrivener and also just Google Docs. And so I kind of like, I get in such a vibe of like bang, 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 bullet point, I'll just treat it like I'm kind of going indenting in and out. But I wish I had more experience because it sounds like that is way more organized. Interesting.
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes, gotcha. Well, yeah, exactly. Best we can do. Well, thank you for that. So OneNote sounds like a really cool option. Thank you also Notion, Root. That sounds rad. I need to check that out as well. That sounds like an amazing way to kind of bring things up to speed because I love being able to search within a document to basically be like, when was the last time they saw Peiwan? When was the last time that this scorpion charm was referenced? And it's very powerful for me because I'm able to like really, really track it. And then also occasionally if I forget stuff, I'm like, holy smokes, I forgot about that temple, or I forgot they'd already interacted with that. So that can be an amazing one. Are there any other things, Jon, that like have been like, because I love you talking about your toy box, like I call it sort of like a toolkit, you know what I mean? But it's like same vibe. We're both 7-year-olds is the point. But the but like, what would be some other, I'm not asking you to like spill your proprietary juice, but like, for a new DM, for someone looking to kind of, reach your level and be able to kind of be that organized or be that proficient with running a homebrewed campaign, are there more software or suggestions that you would toss out or things that have made your life easier?
Yeah, actually, hold on. Let me look at my...
Jon, if we're about to do a whole screen share bit, I'm going to lose it, man. If it's a whole screen share...
I promise. No. So Spells 5e is a great app that has all of the spells down. It's a great quick reference of like... Because I think that the idea of like your players being like, I cast weird, and then you're like, I know, like, yes, and like having your players like read it out loud, it's just a handy like quick reference. You can search all the spells. Very good.
Great point.
Fight Club 5 is a good one for
encounters,
sheets
right?
You can share.
Oh, okay, got it. Character sheets. I'm sorry. I should just let you speak.
Yep.
That's a great one.
Let's see, and then what else? Notion is great, obviously.
Notion.
Spotify for like, I think it's really important to like set the vibe.
100%.
There are tons of great playlists out there that like cover like any environment that you'd be in, that I think just like add something a little bit more evocative, and then otherwise I think it's dice and paper. Like
dice and paper.
I don't think I go too tech heavy on anything. Because I also like the game. I like the game being a disconnect from technology in a lot of ways.
Yes, that's a good point. That's fear.
Oh,
yeah.
Incarnate, INKA.
That's map making software, right?
Yeah, and it's so good.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's very easy to pick up. You can make some really cool Yeah, INKARNATE. I'm going to put it in the
awesome. Please do.
Well,
I have heard of.
Yeah.
You know what? I have seen some incarnate maps. Yes, I have not experienced it, but that's a great idea, especially if you have something again like in homebrew all the time. I'm sure you run into it too. I'm like, dang it, I need like a temple that has like a bunch of palm trees in it, you know, and it's so fun to kind of welcome back, Foos. It's so fun to sort of be able to use something to like literally make specifically what you need in that moment for your campaign. That ups immersion for me so much. Okay, Fusco, you've used Incarnate. Great, that's a cosign I needed. I need to get better at that. Like I will occasionally sketch maps. I mean like rudimentary like 2D. Here's where you are. But mostly I just go and I'll like use Patreon or just find someone that's more talented than me and like cite them and just use their work.
There are tons of great free maps out there.
Yeah. But you mentioned the spells list. Like the 5e spells is massive. I don't have my phone next to me, but there's one that's also the 5e, I think the Bestiary or the 5e
cool.
monster manual maybe.
Okay.
But it more or less has all creatures, fae, fiends, and constructs. Basically has like everything that would be like a non-NPC.
Okay.
I have found that, thank you for that, Root. I will check that out as well. I'm sure Reddit, I'm sure Battle Maps, that'd be a smart one. But I have found, like, I used it because my first character was a druid. And I was like, oh shit, man, I'm about to pop into an octopus.
Oh, right, 'cause you gotta like, yeah.
But I needed to know the challenge rating and like, at first I was like adding them to my character sheet and I was like, this is way too much. I just need to consult. And I found that as a DM, sometimes if I'm needing just a little bit of juice, sometimes if I just pull that up and just, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to bring up some random like challenge rating 9. Here we go. Ooh. Like a drow, like battle master. Ooh, like dude uses a whip. Ooh, okay, like this guy's spicy.
Throw it in.
Now, am I gonna make him a drow? Like probably not, because like drows are really specific in my campaign. But I can use that stat block and turn him into some a-hole from Alabama or whatever it is, and you know, and then like boom. And so I don't know. I have found that like sometimes, especially because so much of my stuff is homebrew, that I forget how helpful and how much it can recharge my jets to go Alabama, to go and take in other people's work, you know, and see what they've done well and let that kind of fill me up, you know.
And nothing is going to burn out a DM more than like having to write all of your own stuff. Like it's such a martyr approach to like the work of being a DM.
Yes.
Use other people's stuff. If it's free or if you want to pay for it, borrow. Like it's not a solo journey. Like DMing is a collective effort.
Yes, that is completely true. And sorry to kind of derail real quick, because my boy Red Sage is coming through with a raid. Sage, thank you so much, dude. Get out of here. You think we can't handle a raid? We're a couple pros. I'm sitting here with 5e Trash, a.k.a. my boy, the Trash Man. He's actually Jon Aldric. He's a wonderful DM creator, homebrew specialist. I'm Carpe, the DM. Sage, dude, you are too kind coming through. I appreciate you, Prince. Sage is actually going to be hopping on, doing an episode in, I think, 2 weeks. I need to double check that. But thank you so much for coming through. I usually on Wednesdays do just this. I bring on really bad ADMs. I basically just like learn from them, listen to what they do, what they have found is successful, what has been something they learned from that was maybe a mistake, and then we also take questions from chat and just sort of chop it up. So appreciate you, Sage. Were you guys running a live play? Like I hope it was a great session. But yeah, man, that's totally true. It's important to kind of, you know, find ways to not feel like you have to play hero ball as the DM, especially when you're running a homebrew. You know, like find ways to make it a little bit easier on yourself. And so much of that, like as you're saying, Fusco, great point, like is understanding how collaborative it can be and how much responsibility that can take off your plate. Totally love that, man. Well, you know, I feel like this is kind of a spicy cue. I feel like this is sort of a tough cue that I really do like asking, just because it's can be a crazy moment. But I'm not gonna say you. I'm not gonna blame you. But has your campaign killed any player characters?
Ooh. My campaign has not killed any player characters.
Cool. Good.
It came
Bloodless.
very close. So it's actually been kind of fun. So a player character was petrified.
Oh,
The
shit.
players were not at a level where they could cure them, and it was like in a dungeon. So he was playing this Loxodon cleric.
Cool.
They were facing off with the Medusa. The Medusa like full on petrified him, and they were only at level 4. They weren't at a level of like actually being able to unpetrify him, remove the curse. So it turned into a scenario where that player effectively died and wrote a new character. But then about 6 or 7 sessions later, that player woke back up as their original character. And I was able to pull in that original character's backstory, and that someone found him, revived him, and he's now kind of, because this is a long thread. Basically, they left a city that is like on the brink of disaster, and that character, the Loxodon, is now back in that city, and so the players are able to see through his eyes and learn what's unfolding as like a little vignette at the beginning of each session, while they go off and try to find the solution. So it's a great way of like like turning him basically into an NPC, but one that's, you know, the players all have a lot of like love for and engagement with. So, you know, it became a tool to like further tell the story and like keep the players involved. And at sort of a macro level.
Dude, I love that, John. That is such a great idea, man. And you are also then, and thank you so much for the follow. By the way, guys, we hit our 75 follower goal. Like, let's fucking go. I am giving a giveaway. It's actually going to be a Coffee Cops tank top, which I hope you guys love. I hand-dyed a bunch of tank tops around this time last year because I wrote a half-hour comedy that I then produced, and I made that as like a fundraiser to more or less sell the tank tops, make my money back. I still have, I think, 11 tank tops, and to be honest, like I feel like I'm a very creative person, but I don't make a lot of stuff with my hands. Other than, I guess, like occasionally trouble, but this was an example of me literally tie-dyeing these with my partner, who's way more skilled than I am, but they came out really, really well. So next session, which is going to be next Monday, will begin with me, and anyone that follows in between now and then will be included in that. But I will essentially be random selecting from my followers list one follower that will win a tank top. So thank you guys so much, man. I mean, Sage, thank you for the raid. Thank you so much for the follow on that. You guys are so sweet. And John, thank you for your patience as I, again, just like take a great answer and savagely redirect it with my own mismanaged PR campaign. So thank you for your patience on that. That is an amazing way to handle. I mean, that totally counts as a character death. What an amazing way to Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I totally like, but it's not even. You then used it as a device to get more out of your campaign. Like, that's what it's all about. Like, you had it have meaning, right? And then you're also using that to vignette. I don't know if you do it like beginning of the session or whatever, but that is, I love that kind of stuff. I love beginning the session talking as if you're the weaver in the city they just left. And then all of a sudden it's like, wait, what are we doing? But you're just barely giving them like another perspective, some more information. Oof, it's dope.
Yeah, I think it's a nice way too, I think, to just like, because I don't know how everyone else's tables are. My table chatters so much before a game. We're like, we sit down at 7 and we're starting the game actually maybe at like 7:45. And so it's a good way of like, I think like once we dive into that, we get into like some deep storytelling for like, 5 minutes, and then we get into like player agency and like coming back to like where the party is at that point. So
copy. That's cool, man. Yeah. I literally, like, I feel like I'm like blowing smoke, but I'm not. I mean, at the end of every single one of these, I'm always so desperate. I'm so frothy to get in one of your campaigns. Like literally every DM I've talked
anytime.
To. Like, dude, I'm coming. You know what? Okay, let me ask you this, because this might be another little spicy anglito. Would be, have you ever, and could I then perhaps, have you ever brought in a, like a human or whatever, have you ever brought in someone to play like a villain? like a Lieutenant BBEG or some sort of
I like kind of like a PvP type of thing, right?
A bit. I mean
Yeah, I've not done that. I kind of love that idea. I did a little bit of that when I was a player that was evil, and then I ended up playing against my party, but not as a DM. And I do love a guest star. Like, we will fold in, like, if someone's got a friend in from out of town and they want to play, we will fold in, like, some sort of episodic, like, this is why this person plops in, and they become part of the canon. And I think that's super fun.
Yes.
But I've not brought in, like, a adversary. I love that, though. I might steal that.
I've done it. I've really enjoyed it. I've done it both ways, right? Where I've brought in like the friend of the friend that's coming through that we all know that like is just in town for a minute, and I've also had people come in and play like the head acolyte of the evil god Thalos, and in both angles it was really fun and satisfying. But I did recently run an arc with a very good friend who I actually have been playing some live sessions on Mondays with on Twitch. His name's Matt Trammell. But he basically has been playing a character named ckery, who is a drow from Drowlabama, but is a drow and essentially was introduced to my main campaign IRL maybe 3 months ago. They didn't know her from, a stick in the forest, and she essentially had like massive ulterior motives and kind of like robbed the party, got an angle on them, got the better of them, got out of town.
I love that.
Dude.
What a fun way to like get someone in at the table for like a blip and like not feel like they're like shadowed by the party, because they are not necessarily trying to weave into the party's motivations. They're attached, they're at the table, but they've got their own thing going on.
Exactly.
And so I think that opens up that creativity for that guest star. That's super cool.
Dude, thank you for being so kind. I mean, truly, that was the intention, was being like, and he also is an actor that is, I know him well, so I know what he does, and he's great. And just by giving him those bullet points, those motivators, those perspectives, he took it. It was so funny. He was like, man, am I a device? Like, do you want me to do this, that, the other? I'm like, dude, all I want is for you to be a chaos agent. Like, go and live, breathe, bring ckery off the page. You know what I mean? And he, of course, just nailed it. But it was some of the most fun I've had as a DM, partly because I'm just sitting back eating popcorn. You know what I mean? I'm like, yeah, dude. And then she pulls out the blade. What do you do next? You know what I mean? And like that for me can be super fun, because then, and everybody knew each other. Like, there wasn't any risk in terms of, oh, who is this person? Like, oh, they deceived me. That sucks. Like, everybody knew, yeah, exactly. Everybody knew who ckery was. So I think that's kind of an aspect of that consent checklist, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because the PvP aspect is the only area can get a little bit icky, because I told Matt that I was like, look, dude, like, they might kill you, like, they're gonna try to kill you for sure, and you just don't want anyone to feel undervalued or like they're just being used as like a device, you know what I mean?
Right.
So that's the only kind of caveat I would just make sure to sort of toss out there in terms of that.
Yeah. And I think to plus one that, I think, you know, when that happens, there's like nothing in the rulebook that says you can't like pause the campaign for a second and be like, hey, this is what's happening. This is where it seems like this is going. Raise your hand if you're good with it. And if not, if everyone doesn't raise their hand, then let's pause and like find a new direction for the table. Like, you know, that's
100%. I also, because dude, I think that's great advice. I just plus to it, the idea of I would almost try to present that as I, the DM, am unsure. You know what I mean? Because I love taking that pressure, and this is not to, I just more mean like this, I appreciate this from DMs, right? Is whenever they're like, hey, like, I can tell where this is going, like, I'm not sure I'm cool with it unless we're all cool with it. You know what I mean? Because then sometimes if you have the one person that isn't cool with it, but everybody else is, they're like, yeah, I'm cool with it, but like they're totally not. You know what I mean? In that way, if you can immediately ally with the potential minority opinion, that can make it a little bit easier to present. You know what I mean? So, but because that's a great way to do it, is be like, you know what? skirt, hit pause. Right. Are we good? And 100%. That's hopefully also something that was like, was leveled out. Okay, so, gosh, this has all been so juicy and so helpful. Fusco, thank you for saying that. I've enjoyed those live play sessions so much. We are, of course, now about to move into why everyone is here. The rapid fire. Now, the rapid fire, John, I don't want you to get stressed, dude. I can see the tension just rippling across your face and body. Yes, I feel it. I sense it. Rapid fire is, of course, it's super high stakes, dude. It's high stakes. It's whenever I'm moving quick, I'm rapid firing the questions at you. They are essentially binary questions that are like typically like either or, pasta, pizza, whatever, red, blue, and but they're of course D&D adjacent. Those of you at home, of course, if you want to, chime in, I love knowing what people want, what their kind of opinions are on stuff. I have switched up a couple of the questions just to kind of keep it spicy. And so we are about to dive into that. Johnny, are you ready? Are you prepared?
I'm ready.
Is it time? Okay.
Bring on the trash.
Then yes, exactly. Time to take out the trash. It is time for the rapid fire. So, what I do like to start with is the question of when creating a character and building their stat block, do you use standard array, point buy, 4d6 drop lowest, or 3d6?
3d6.
3d6, you fucking maniac.
D&D is too easy. 3d6.
Dude, that is a badass take. That is the first time someone has said 3d6. I love it. I fucking love it. That is so intense. I would average an 8. Like, I've rolled 118 in my life in character creation, so I know I'd be coming in like 2-2-1. Great. Okay.
I will respond to a note in the chat.
Yes, please.
It says 3d6 and you haven't killed a PC. That was when I did standard array. That was when I was a rookie DM. Now I'm much more brutal.
Dude, that's funny. It does take a little bit of that time where, like, because you're clearly like a thoughtful dude. It does take a little bit of that time where you're like, I gotta honor the monsters and what they want. Here we go. Oh my gosh. Okay, 3d6. You heard the man. Okay, when referring to it, is it a DM or is it a GM?
I go back and forth. I would say I'm fluid on the D to G.
Okay, I like that. Okay, very well. Giants or dragons?
Dragons. Giants are boring.
Giants are boring.
Giants are boring.
Yeah, fair enough. Dragons are in the name. Respect that. Red dragon or blue dragon?
Blue dragon.
Blue dragon.
I was really into the blue Power Ranger as a kid, so I don't know if you want background, but I'm gonna give it to you no matter what.
Please.
So.
Yeah. No. 100%. Is that purely cosmetic?
Yes. 100%.
Perfect. As well it should be.
I need a dragon to match my eyes. So yeah.
Love it. Get those scales and then suit them to the color palette. Okay. Red dragon. Sounds like blue dragon. Okay. Copper dragon or gold dragon?
Ooh. I'm gonna go with gold.
Okay.
Keep it fancy.
Are dragons hatched or is it a live birth?
They're hatched.
Okay, that's fine.
That's decided. That is, yeah.
You're like, that's not a question. Okay. Do you prefer spellcasters or melee?
Spellcasters.
Spellcasters. Okay, love it. D100 or D12?
D100.
D100, let's go.
Deeply chaotic.
Yeah, exactly. And like, whenever you think D100, sorry, this is like a deviation, but whenever you think D100, where do you go? Like, what is the D100, like, what is the role used for in your mind? Obviously, it could be used for a dozen things, but in your mind.
I will use a D100 a lot of times when players have really, really, frankly, stupid plans. So like, I will lean into the rule of cool to an extent, and then it becomes saying, all right, these are the chances out of 100 that I think that you have. I'll roll in front of the table. If you hit this, then it goes. If you hit below this, it like is abysmal. So like trying to create like that range of like very unlikely that you'll get like a perfect success, somewhat unlikely that you're gonna get a partial success, and then like here's kind of the range of what could happen based on what you've described to me.
Yeah, that's a great use, man. It's a great use because then you are also giving yourself way more flexibility in terms of like, okay, you have a 7% chance, but then you're also just pulling out the D100, dude, and rolling in the open.
Yeah,
like that's fun because that's creating a dramatic moment with the dice. Okay, D100 it is. Okay, great axe or great sword?
Great sword.
Great sword. Okay, 2d6. Let's fucking go. Would you prefer a +1 to your spell attack bonus or +1 to your spell save DC?
Spell save DC.
Ooh, I love that.
Way more like fuck 'em ups with.
Okay,
other players,
I agree,
right? Like,
and I think that's the
monsters.
answer. For some reason, like I always want spell attack bonus. Like I love just like torching people with my shit. Like, but yes, you're right. I think that is the correct answer. Okay, elves or dwarves?
Dwarves.
Gnomes or halflings?
Halflings.
Halflings, love that. Especially since apparently gnomes drop the nukes. Like, what's up with that, Gabby? Okay.
Yeah, I'm pro peace, pro world peace.
Yeah, totally. It's like, yo, the gnomes got some answering to do. Okay, so halflings, I love that. Also very cute. Also, who doesn't have hairy feet and love them? Okay, tabaxi or tiefling? This is the hardest question.
It's hard because both are so horny.
I know they are.
But I'm
They're
gonna
very
go
sexy.
with
They're
the
very...
tiefling because it's less on the furry spectrum. That's my personal
I was
stance.
about to say there's less chance of like some kink adjacent shade.
There's a lot of inappropriate fan art on all sides of that question.
Dude,
but yeah.
Yes, correct. Simply put, correct. I did not know what a vlogger was. In terms of like I mean, obviously there's like vloggers, but there's, well, you know what? Doesn't matter. Rapid fire. Keep moving. Okay. So this is the only trick question on here. This is the only one that does not have a wrong answer. You prefer turtles or turtles? And heads up, John, we stand turtles on this show, dude.
I'm very pro turtle.
Thank you.
I set up turtles as much as possible, because no one ever wants to play a turtle, at least at my table.
Yeah,
for some
what's
reason.
up with that?
So they are some of the coolest NPCs. Do you know how much cool shit you can do with a shell?
The shell?
Actually,
exactly. No, get it. Go get it.
I'm working on
Let's fucking go.
my Necromancer class.
Hell yeah. Is this a doodle pad or do you sketch on this?
Yeah, this is my iPad. I was working on this concept of a Necromancer turtle, and their shell is a mausoleum.
Bro! That's so good. It reminds me so much of Elden Ring. Dude, that's cool.
Yes, that was one of the inspirations.
No, but like combining the mausoleum.
Yeah.
That's like a combination. Dude, that's beautiful. That's sick.
Thank you.
John, we'll get to that. Okay, dude, you're trying to slow down the rapid fire. Nice try, but that's sick.
Sorry.
Okay, no, I'm joking. I also love turtles, man, and I just started playing a turtle rogue, and it's amazing. Okay, do you prefer, as cantrips go, produce flame or firebolt?
Firebolt.
Guidance or mage hand?
Ooh, mage hand.
Mage hand. That's a toughie, though. Mage hand's cool. You can do a lot of cool stuff. Okay, healing word or cure wounds?
Cure wounds, but I forget the difference between the two. But cure wounds.
Cure wounds does a D8 as opposed to a D4, I believe. But healing word is a bonus action. You can do it from range. So there's a little bit of difference.
Okay.
But I prefer cure wounds too, man. I mean, like, I want to roll the chunkiest dice you can possibly hand me. Okay, fireball or lightning bolt?
Lightning bolt. I think fire's kind of overplayed.
Ooh, okay, I like that. I personally prefer lightning bolt just because of the range, but I've never heard that angle too. Like, I want to see more like sorcerers, just like instead of being entombed in fire, I want them wreathed in lightning. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I feel that. Okay, do you, where is it? Okay, mass suggestion or mass charm person?
Mass suggestion.
Cool.
Charm person always feels like a creepy spell. So.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it depends, I guess, on what the suggestion is. Okay. Do you prefer Hunter's Mark or Hex?
Hex.
Let's go. I know you're a lock. I know. I still got to ask, though. Okay, are you starting a campaign in a tavern or a brothel?
I usually start it in, like, jail.
Yeah. So both. The answer's both.
I'll go with tavern. Yeah.
No, dude, jail. Okay, I need to just add something like that. I love learning from these things. Okay, I'm gonna add a different one that will come back and be something weird next time. Okay. If someone attempts to sleight of hand one of your players, do you give them a perception check or do you use their passive perception?
Passive perception.
I like that, baby boy.
Because if you give them the perception check, it throws away the secret.
It's the whole meta bullshit. Agreed. I think I am so adroit at like lying and just sort of like being casual with my life despite my own anxiety that I do feel confident at being like, you know what, guys? You see the corner of this red awning and I more or less style it like something is about to happen off screen. And then I'm like, you know what? Roll a perception check. In the few times that I will afford them one. Because rules is written, there is no perception check. That's what passive perception, one of the reasons it's even around. But sometimes if it's like a big steal or a big theft, I feel, or if they're like in any way on guard or alert, I might give them. Yeah. But agree.
I think you got to give them a thread to figure out what happened when they realize something is missing.
Totally. Like if you were in a game with me and I start describing how crowded it is, if I describe, people pressing up against you like a New York subway, you're being robbed. Okay? Yes. That's what's happening. Okay. I like that though. Passive perception is where it goes down. So now let's get into the real juice, although I feel like I already know all these answers. Wizard or sorcerer?
Sorcerer.
Okay. Well, amazing. Cleric or warlock?
Warlock.
Love it. Now this, I was really interested because we haven't talked too much about these two types, but are you more of a paladin guy or a fighter?
I think paladins represent toxic masculinity, so I'm going to go with fighter. Fighter is the everyman.
Let's go. Person. Okay, I like that. It's like a scholarship athlete versus a walk-on. Yeah.
Yes.
Who am I letting date my daughter? You're right. Okay, good point. Fighter it is. Druid or ranger? Druid, same, dude. I try not to like bleed too hard, but druids are sick.
Rangers just feel like druid light. Like they're I'll just be a fighter if I want to do the things that a ranger can do. But if I want the fantasy, I'm gonna be a druid.
Yeah, I think that's well put. Like I always defend rangers just because like I love it as a class. Like it makes so much sense within the fantasy and like the shared lore of the general stuff, the Tolkien and how we sort of intake our fantasy. But agreed, in terms of like mechanics and usage, it's sort of like, dang, I would almost rather, use something else, something that had more of like a, something that had gone down before. Okay, final question of the rapid fire. Should cats have dark vision? Yes or no?
Of course.
I
have a cat. The cat is terrifying at nighttime only. It is. Yeah. What a miss.
That is so
I hope someone, I don't normally wish this upon people, but I hope some game designer was fired for missing that at Wizards.
Yeah, no, I feel that. It is definitely something that is most felt with the familiars, right? But it's something that like anytime you spend any time around a cat, it's like, dude, my cat, like I will get attacked in the dead of night. Like, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like there is no light.
I will bleed at 2 a.m. if I have to go to the bathroom. Every time.
Totally. No, I'm with that. It's a low light vision thing. Yeah, they just don't list it as having dark vision. Exactly. I love Aragon. Guys, thank you so much for joining in. I truly go back on the VODs and I almost always will go back through because I repost these interviews on YouTube, on my Carpe the DM YouTube channel, typically Thursdays or Sundays. And it's always just fun for me to go back and see in the moment, like, what Jon had to say and really kind of take it in. But I also just love getting to know you guys a little bit more in that sense. Okay, Jon, you did it, dude. Rapid fire complete.
Oh my God.
Complete.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
Dude, this has been the best, man. Like, we did get, oh my gosh, Smith Alda, first off, welcome. They ask, are any of your campaigns recorded? Jon, do you have any online campaigns? And maybe that'd be a good time to tell us where we can find you.
Yeah, so no campaigns recorded. We have talked with my table about potentially doing that sometime soon. A lot of my content is around game modules. So you can go to 5etrash.com. That's the number 5etrash.com.
Cool.
Bunch of playable races, magic items, subclasses. And then additionally, you can find my Necromancer on the DM's Guild. That's a full class with 3 subclasses, a 4th one coming in October.
Wait. Let me kick it over to... Oh, wrong one. So sorry. This is actually it right here. I have it up. It's rad as fuck. 5-star rating. Again, earlier in the chat, John dropped us a link for a 50-cent purchase, which is absolutely nothing. It looks amazing. Like, I followed as you have created this, dude. It looks incredible. But please, I'd love to know, more. I mean, you talked about it earlier, but you have a bunch of things on DM's Guild, right?
So I got 3 things on DM's Guild. I got this. I have a free module to teach DMs how to basically create a codex or a cryptex for your campaign. So like, this was a piece of my campaign for a long time. So the players had this cryptex with this language on it that they had to decode over sessions.
Asshole! Wait a minute, dude. We need to do an hour on this because you tweeted this out. You gave this to your players, did you not?
Yeah, so they had this. It had kind of like this secret that they had been trying to uncover for 3 years, and they had been slowly collecting clues to decode this language and figure out what this secret word was.
That is so good.
It was such a fun reveal when they finally got it open. It was not supposed to last 3 years, but they were super engaged with it. They loved it. So it was one of my brightest DM moments.
That is so good. I am truly blown away by that, man. That is, Smith Alda, this is sort of what we do here. Smith says they're basically new to D&D, starting to learn things here and there. Fuzka, I'm right there with you. My mind is blown. I mean, I saw you tweet this out. This was like 6 months ago. I don't even know. And this was even before I was on Twitch. I was just like, man, that is rowdy. Like, if I was at a table and someone handed me a literal cipher, dude, that text thread would be blowing up. I mean, just going to get it and figure it out and get it right there. Like, come on.
It was so
awesome.
satisfying. And the guide is free, so obviously you have to buy your own cryptex and stuff, but it teaches you how to make it, how to build clues that people can kind of uncover over the course of the campaign.
That's good, man.
Definitely check it out. And if you have any tips on it, let me know. Yeah.
No, I don't have any tips, man. That's the best thing I've ever heard.
I mean, if people read it and they're like, oh, I did this and this really worked for my table,
cool.
I always love to hear about that
I'm
stuff.
just giving you some sass, man. That's such a great idea. I'm more just blown away because I forgot you did that. I think we didn't. I always am afraid of being a reply guy on Twitter, but I really do love replying to shit because I'm like, oh, dude, that's fucking rad.
Be my reply guy.
I am. Okay, exactly. But that was before.
We can be mutual reply guys.
Well, dude, I'm now, I'm your reply guy now. Come on. But that was before I'd stepped into that role. And I just remember seeing that and being like, that is incredible. So I'm so glad that you brought that back up. And just to sort of I want to go back through and just hit on 5e trash and hit on the DM's Guild. But Smith Alda, was asking, I have recorded some of my campaigns, really just the one-on-ones that I've been running with ckery. So essentially, Smith Alda, I have, several campaigns I run. One of them is with a long-standing homebrew, which is a home table of mine. I also offer it as a hired DM for hire through Start Playing D&D, but it is something that I've run 4 sessions of. We just finished the last session on Monday, and I will be uploading those each week on Mondays. So maybe check out the Carpe, the DM YouTube channel. That's where all of these interviews end up, and that's where I do put my gameplay sessions up as well. But guys, thank you. Thank you for coming through. Thank you for just supporting us, for asking questions. We do have a couple things that we have to do before we get out of here. So here's going to be the sequencing of events. I am going to hammer 5etrash.com as well as the DM's Guild. Put it out. John is a stud. If you're not already following him on Twitter, he also has a Twitch profile. 5etrash.com is sort of his catch-all for everything. And if you search 5etrash on the DM's Guild, that's where you can find him as well. Gervon, he's back, Papa. Welcome back in, Gervon. You're the man, dude. But seriously, John has been an amazing resource to me, just as a DM that runs a ton of games and is looking for cool content, but also just as a guy that enjoys a goof, enjoys a laugh. I find you very funny, my dude. Straight up. That's no bullshit. So that's...
You're one of dozens.
Yeah. Well, hey, are they replying? Are they replying, dude? Let's talk about helping the algorithm, okay? No, but so that's order of business number 1. Order of business number 2 is please drop me a follow here. We just hit our followers goal, so at our very next, which will be next Monday, I am just running a basic campaign prep. It's where I go in. I show people sort of my DM notes. I go through my process before I run my Tuesday night session. So this upcoming Monday, I will be doing that, and I will be running. Sorry, it's actually this way. Beep, beep. I will be running a more or less a raffle from my followers list. So drop me a follower on Twitch if you want to be a part of that. We'll be giving away prizes, and that will also be just a way to get live notifications for whenever we run these kind of interviews. The whole reason I got onto Twitch, truly, was just to create a space where people could come, vibe, collab, learn about D&D, whether they're never played before or are, a veteran of 15 years. So I really appreciate that, Alda. And then the second to last order of business is just straight up shouting out. And remind me, Mapro, do you stream? If so, let me know. Because right now I got to shout out my girl Fuzka. She runs an amazing Twitch channel. If you're looking for D&D content...
What the hell's happening with the staff? Or I'm just going to have you keep casting random spells until you do.
I fucking love knitters. I should have warned you, Aldric. I'm so sorry. I have a Stream Element plugin that allows me to bring up someone else's Twitch channel. So that just happened. So sorry for the absolute absence of any warning whatsoever.
No worries.
But yeah, and... But Fusco runs a great D&D session. If you're looking for that as a resource, please check it in. Ninners is a G as well. He's a great D&D guy and a great DM. But Johnny, anything I'm forgetting, man? Like anything we should do to kind of button this episode? Like, you're the man, dude.
I don't know.
It's been great.
Yeah. No, I got nothing else. I think this has been great. If you like or hate anything on my site or on the Dungeon Master, on the DM's Guild, let me know. I love feedback. I just get excited whenever anyone reads my stuff, and that's how I get better as a designer. So always happy to rap about any hot takes on my work, or if you just like it,
Dude,
all that. So, but no, this has been great.
That is a highly professional and very mature move, dude. Respect the hell out of that. So guys, it's Jon Aldric at 5e Trash. I'm Carpe the DM. Again, if you like what you saw, please drop us a follow, help support us. I'm typically streaming Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, but you can find Jon on Twitter all the time. Now, this truly is the final order of business, so I saved it for last. Whenever I first started streaming, I was actually raided by two people that have gone on to be really just amazing people that have been supportive. I consider them friends of mine. One of them was at Altruistic Latte. She is a fantastic D&D player and content creator. The other was a gentleman by the name of Mim111. They basically came through. They raided me post-stream with 7 or 8 people, and I was sitting there running my first D&D DM press session, and all of a sudden 7 people rolled through. It jazzed me up. It infused me with a bunch of energy and juice, and I thought it was super rad and super supportive. So we're just gonna pay that forward right now. We're gonna raid someone else that is doing a Dungeons and Dragons vibe, and if you can stick around, drop them a hey, drop them a keep it up. It really just makes such a difference. Anybody that's out there, Gurvanch, Fuzka, I mean, we know this as streamers. It is just so uplifting to have somebody roll through and be yo, this is cool, thanks for doing it. So anyway, I can never really tell what their vibe is before I start the raid. So I'm not necessarily co-signing them for the end of time. However, let's go through, let's support them. And everybody out there, have a great rest of your day. I love you guys. You guys are the best. We'll catch you next Monday. So we are going to be doing that in about, I'm not sure what it is, 10 seconds? Jon, we gotta kill 4 seconds,
9,
dude.
8.
What's the?
Oh, I just started counting.
Okay. What's your favorite 9th level spell?
Ooh, gosh.
Don't say wish.
It's gotta be wish.
Damn it! Yeah, okay, it is wish, of course. I like Arcane Gate a lot. But before we dive into any more sort of examination, we got to raid, guys. I love y'all. We out.
All right. See ya.